Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris here, coming to you live, 8 o'clock here on a Tuesday, and we've got a good show on tap for you, as always. We're going to open up the phone lines in a moment, but we're not going to do that right off the bat because we're waiting for our guest to get here. It's our regular guest, Tim Takacs, elder law expert and attorney, who's going to open up the phone lines, take your calls on everything from estate planning to dealing with either a situation you're in or perhaps your parents are in, senior citizens, dealing with, moving them to assisted living facilities or how they can better stay in their own home, how you can get their finances in place. There's so many issues that come up to play, and it's not just, like I said, if you're dealing with that situation yourself, it's also if you're dealing with it with a loved one. And that's kind of my situation. I've got to tell you, as we wait for Tim to get here, and he's not arrived yet because the traffic apparently on some areas out there is horrendous. Just want to kind of set the table a bit for you. And some of you can join in the conversation. Maybe you can even share with me how you handled this. Tim is one of the foremost experts on elder law in the entire country. He travels the country actually meeting with other lawyers, helping them set up their practice. And he was really something of a visionary, a few decades ago, realizing that as the baby boomers age, there's going to be a segment of the law, and there's so many segments of that focus on the legal needs for those of us who are aging, and not just, you yourself, but your parents who are aging, and the estate planning and how you set up powers of attorney and living wills and regular wills. All that kind of stuff comes into play. And so he's helped me out an awful lot. Now, my take, and I'm wondering how you handled this, if you did, is dealing with your elderly parents. Look, folks are living longer than ever before. That's great. And maybe they're physically doing fairly well, but they begin to slip a little bit mentally, okay? You may have just natural progression of, forgetfulness that happens to us all, I think, to some degree as we age. But then you have senility, and then, of course, you have Alzheimer's. And, I have a situation I don't mind talking about with my folks. My folks aged quite a bit. They're in their 80s now, and they still, for whatever reason, believe they're still 17 years old. And they want to drive, and they want to go here, and they wanted to stay in their home. We were able to finally get them to agree to move from where they lived in Oregon to Boise, where my brother lives, and they're in assisted living. It's not a nursing home. It's like an apartment complex, but it has services there available to them, including meals. And the question is dealing with them as they become more and more forgetful about dealing with their medicines, whether or not they're satisfied with staying where they are, and they keep talking about wanting to leave. And one of the bigger things is my concern, as they still are in charge, as they should be, of their own personal finances, making sure they don't get taken by the scam artists out there. And I've talked with Tim about this, and you've probably received some of these calls. Senior citizens especially, maybe a little more trusting to begin with, one. Two, they may not be as savvy when it comes to dealing with the scam artists out there today that can collect so much information on you that you think, well, they must be legitimate, because how else would they know that I have a grandson that lives in Oregon? The problem with it now is there's computers, and they don't realize that people can garner so much information on you. And then these guys call and they start, here, check this out. This happened to my dad, all right? My dad was at home. It was an early morning call, so he wakes up and he's a little bit, kind of foggy-headed anyway, like most of us are when we first get up. And there's someone calling saying that they're calling from a prison in Mexico. And they're saying that his grandson, Huey, which is my son, is in prison down there, was picked up for some type of problem down there in Mexico, and that if he's to be released, he needs to have a bond sent to him from the States in a cash order of like $3,000. And it really frightened my dad. He's thinking, oh gosh, Huey's down there in a Mexican prison, he needs money, and they're giving him all this information on how you go to the bank, you get your money order, you send it. Now, the fact that it's happening to my folks like this means that these scam artists are doing this to a lot of folks, and these folks are falling for it, or they're not still doing it. They're making money doing this, these scumbags. All right, so how do they find out that my dad has me as his son and his grandson's Huey and the age? They knew all this stuff to convince him. They Googled it. They got all that information. My dad is to the point where, all right, okay, I'll get on that. And he hangs up. But before he goes to the bank to get the money order to send it to this P.O. box somewhere in Mexico where it would have gone down a black hole and we never would have seen it again, he made the call to me, okay? Thank goodness he does. And I think after the fact, he was a little embarrassed about it, but he calls me and he goes, Nick, I just got a call. How's Huey? I understand that he's in a Mexican prison. And I'm like, Dad, wait a second. And I'd heard this scam that it actually happened here in Nashville. We've done stories on this. And I'm like, Dad, wait a second. You had a call? Huey's okay. Huey's 16 years old. What on earth would he be doing in Mexico? And my dad's silent for a moment. And he starts thinking about it. And he goes, well, you're right. But I never would have imagined someone would make something like this up. And so I was under the impression it was true. And I said, Dad, and I felt bad telling him this because I knew in a moment he was going to be embarrassed. I'm like, Dad, this is a scam. These people get information on you off the internet, and then they try to set you up for these types of things and get you to send money to them. And you could tell at that point, goes, oh, I'm so glad I called you. But in a way, I don't look at my dad like, how could you fall for that? Look, you love your grandchild. You get a call like this out of the blue, and they're pushing, and they know all the right things to say, and you believe it. And I can totally understand, especially how a senior citizen might fall for that. And had he not just taken the moment, just, on a lark, to call me, and thank goodness I was awake and answered the phone, he would have sent $3,000 down to Mexico. $3,000 that my dad can't afford to send, but he would have. It's those kind of things that happen. And I guess I use that as an example to you about, my concern of how you manage my parents' finances when there's people out, with bad intentions to get hold of that money. And what if they start spending more frivolously, and how do you protect against this? The last thing I want to do, and I've talked about this with Tim before, is get a conservatorship. That is where you take your parents or your loved one to a court of law, and you have it determined by a judge that they are no longer competent to stand on their own and take care of their own finances. They need help. And judges are very, very careful about granting that, because basically what you're doing is taking away their power, their independence, and their rights to control their own personal finances and their lives. They can no longer make the decisions. They basically become your child, which is the last thing I want. And unscrupulous children can sometimes seek that with intentions of stealing or taking their parents' money. So judges are very, very cautious about that. But if you have doctors come in to testify that, yes, the Alzheimer's progressed where they're no longer fully competent to care for it, the judge can sign off and you run it. Well, I don't want to do that. I have power of attorney. We're dealing with our folks now. We have their money in accounts that they have access to, and it is their money to do with as they please. But we try to manage, and I try to keep tabs on it and watch that money every step of the way to make sure it's not being sent out or spent or getting some kind of account I don't recognize, because you just never know where that comes from. I've asked him about that, and he goes, Nick, when it gets far enough and you worry about this, you have to go and get a conservatorship. I'm not there yet. Have you ever gotten a conservatorship? Have you considered something like that? As parents age, it's the last thing you want to do. And they do talk about that famous circle of life from The Lion King. I mean, it's to the stage now for us where my parents are becoming more and more childlike as they get older, the way we were when we were kids. And now, as opposed to them being my parents, now it's almost the roles are reversed in terms of caring for them. And the most important thing when you make this transition is just try to preserve your parents' dignity as best you can, and give them as much control over their own lives as possible while protecting them. It's like another example. My mom is in this assisted living facility, and she desperately, desperately wants a cat. And she's had cats, and she's a good pet owner. But the last couple of cats she's had before we moved her to this assisted living facility, they ran away. And it's because she could no longer properly care for them. And I worry, a cat in her little apartment unit they live in there, it's something that's going to get underfoot, she's going to fall, she's going to hurt herself, she's going to break a hip or whatever. And so here we are at this stage in the game, not able to agree to let my parents get a cat. Now, we're not saying no. If they on their own just chose to go somewhere and get one, but they keep asking for us for help, and we just keep putting it off. Do you get your parents a cat? It would make her happy just to have a cat to pet, but the care of it, first of all, it wouldn't be fair to the cat, and second of all, in the big picture, they are no longer at the stage where they can do that anymore. All those types of things in terms of dealing with the elderly and how you pay for their nursing homes, which, by the way, my folks now live in Boise, and it's not really a nursing home, it's assisted living, but it's about $4,500 a month for the two of them, all right? Think about that. That's a lot of money, and they're fortunate that they have some savings and Social Security to pay for it. How do you pay for something like that? Idaho, I'm told, it's in the top 3 for most affordable nursing and affordable living facilities in the country. The same type of services they're getting at this facility there, here in Nashville, Tennessee, would cost them $8,000 plus. $8,000 a month for 2 people in an assisted living facility, almost double here in Nashville for the type of services they're getting. How does anyone pay for that? Anyway, all these questions. I understand Tim's here. He's going to be here in a moment, but I know that if you have a veteran in the family, there are sometimes veterans benefits you can get access to help pay for it. You have your Social Security, you have any savings you have in the past, and then beyond that, you're pretty much on your own. What if you don't have the money to pay for this kind of assisted living facility? The only thing you can really fall back on is living with your parents, okay? You can't live these people alone anymore in a big house where they're no longer able to care for themselves, and you sure as heck don't want them to drive. So all of those things are issues to, I think to consider as we go through this. So Tim's coming in. We're going to wire him up, and look at the whole gang. All right. What we'll do is we're going to take a break. When we come back, already some calls coming in, and thank you folks for ringing up. But Tim Takacs, elder law attorney, will join us in just a moment. We'll take a break. 737-7587 is the number. If you have any calls or questions you want to ask along what I was just talking about, or for the big guy who's about to sit down, join us right after this. We'll be right back.